Jonny Bowden. It is an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. You are somewhat of a legend in the world of nutrition and holistic health. And as I told you, the good Lord above told me, you got to message Johnny and get him on the podcast. We have to discuss this whole cholesterol myth because it's kind of out of control right now. So here you are, and thank you for your time, Johnny.
It's my pleasure. When you say it's out of control right now, tell me what you mean by that. That might be a very good place to start.
Yeah, so as I had mentioned to you, I'm in Calgary, Alberta, and the testing that done here is very basic testing. We have universal health care. So to get into the nitty-gritty or those more specialized tests is pretty much out of the realm of the Alberta health system right now. So then
Well, that's a very good place to start because if I had one take-home message for the general population, and obviously, like you, I believe in biochemical individuality. Everybody needs a different path and a different solution. Not every program works for everyone. All given all that, if I had to pick one piece of information that absolutely everybody would benefit by if they listened to, it is this. Stop paying attention to the old-fashioned cholesterol tests and insist on or figure out a way to get the modern cholesterol panel. Good and bad cholesterol is an obsolete concept. It was very useful in the 60s when they said, oh, it looks like cholesterol travels in the body in two different ways, and let's call one of them good and one of them bad. That's kind of like doing a medical diagnosis based on if you're short or tall.
Mhm.
Doctor wants to know if you're short or tall. They're not making the diagnosis based on it. So that's how old-fashioned and out of date good and bad cholesterol are. We now know that you can identify about 13 different subtypes of LDL, that HDL comes in HDL2 and 2A and 2B, and more importantly, HDL is either functional or non-functional, and we can actually tell that in the tests.
Mhm.
You can't see any of that with good and bad cholesterol. That's like using a flip phone in the age of the iPhone 17.
Mhm.
It's just out of date. So if there was one thing I would say to anybody who's confused about this, the test your doctor, and especially if you tell me in Alberta they're not even doing the right, it's so backwards that then you're not getting the full picture of your risk. The
Mhm.
HDL LDL test can conceal lots of information. I can give you examples of that. It can conceal information that says, "Hey, your HDL and LDL look fine, but you're actually in trouble." Or it can do the other thing. Your HDL and LDL look very not very good, but actually you're not in trouble at all. And you can't know that unless you look under the hood.
Mhm. Yeah.
So what we're trying to do here is diagnose what's wrong with a car by putting our hands on the engine. Well, it's warm here, it's cool here. No, you got to open up the hood, dude. And
Mhm.
that's the only and opening up the hood is getting the correct cholesterol test. People ask me all the time, what is it called? Different labs. It's been around for 20 years. That is an astonishing fact when you think of how resistant doctors are to call, as if we didn't have 20 years of data on this damn test. But it's called different things because Quest in the United States we have two major labs, Quest and LabCorp. They both offer the test. They call it different things because they're in competition. So LabCorp calls it the LPIR test, and Quest calls it the cardiac IQ test, and other labs may call it advanced lipid means fat, advanced lipid profile. They are looking at many more numbers than just quote unquote good and bad cholesterol, which is just an obsolete. Let me tell you one little fun fact about cholesterol.
Okay.
Bad cholesterol your audience will like. There is no such thing as good and bad cholesterol. If you took a microscope and a biology student and you took a molecule of cholesterol, of good, bad, and bad cholesterol, it looks the same. It is the same. It is the example to remember is the cholesterol is a passenger in a carrier called a lipoprotein. It's the same damn cholesterol. So I am the same. If I go to LAX and I get on a plane to Philadelphia, or I get on a plane to Hawaii, two different directions, I am the same passenger. I'm just on a different plane. So the new test stopped concentrating so much on cholesterol, the passenger, and started to look at the lipoproteins because they are the carriers of cholesterol. They are the cars that are on the highway. It's the lipoproteins that crash into things they don't belong and start bad. It's not cholesterol doesn't crash into anything. It's sitting in its car.
Mhm.
And what happens is the car crashes, cholesterol spills out, and everybody blames cholesterol for the crash. But that's like blaming the firemen for the fire. I mean, they absolutely, if you're watching, yeah, every time there's a fire, there's firemen. It's a logical conclusion that they started the damn, but they didn't.
Mhm.
And when we understand that, we can stop using this out-of-date test and start saying, what's the traffic in your bloodstream doing? How many lipoproteins are hanging out there? Because if you're a person who is responsible, if you're a cop, a traffic cop, and you're responsible for a busy intersection where there's a lot of possibility of accidents, first question you are going to ask the people who assigned you that corner, the first question is not, well, how many passengers are in the cars that are... No, it's how many cars are on the damn road because the more cars there are, the more likelihood there's an accident. That's why we want to know how many lipoproteins you got floating around, not how much, now, how many pairs of gloves are in the glove compartment.
And this is the problem, Johnny, is most people don't understand this.
Most people and many doctors do not understand this.
Well,
And that is impossible to discuss without discussing politics. But
yeah.
in fact, they don't know that. And in fact, for the most part, the tests I'm talking about, which are absolutely validated, they're not newfangled things that nobody's seen. This has been around really. If you Google particle test, that's the general name. Particle is the name that scientists give to lipoproteins. It means how many lipoproteins. So you look up the particle test, ask how long, ask the great Google, how long has that been around? It's been around a long time. The problem is that they got a great system going right now with just good and bad cholesterol. And if it's too high, you get in a statin, and it's all covered by insurance, and it's very neat. And they don't really want to fix that or change that, even though it would be so much better for the patients because it's a money machine as it is. So why are they going to allow other tests that are going to make them muddy up the water? So they don't really cover these tests. Plus, they're more expensive than good and bad cholesterol, obviously, because they give you a ton more data than good and bad cholesterol. So they don't cover it with insurance. And this is the position doctors are in. They could order it anyway if they were really well educated about it, which they don't usually get if it's not something that insurance is going to cover and it's not in the medical industrial ecology. They don't usually get a lot of education on it. They don't get any education on nutrition, except that they go out and get on their own. They certainly don't get it in medical school. Um, so the doctor would have to know that this test is really good. He or she would have had to study a little bit outside the guardrails of what the holy book says in medicine at any given time. And they'd have to know how valuable it is, and they'd have to be willing to order it. And here's what happens if they start ordering too many. And doctors have told me this in confidence, and it explains so much about why they're so resistant. They start ordering a test that's out of network, they get a call or a visit from, let's say, Blue Shield, which is one of our biggest providers in America. And Blue Shield will say, Dr. Jones, I notice you're prescribing a lot of these tests that are not covered in the network. What's going on with you? If he gets audited, if he loses his Blue Shield connection, he's done. So there's not a lot of incentive to go up against the insurance companies. And the insurance companies and the pharma companies kind of dictate, what's covered, what constitutes disease, when you need a medication. It's pretty simplistic and pretty streamlined. And the purpose of it is only incidentally to help people stay healthy. They would like that to be the result. They're not evil people saying, how can we screw up America and Canada? Let's give it. They're not doing that. They just don't care. Their number one reason for existence is to make profits for their stockholders. And if they could be doing good at the same time, they'd be delighted. But if they have to kill some people or if they have to put some, so be it, because
Mhm.
that's not their main objective. Health is not their main objective, which is why everyone listening to you and everyone listening to podcasts like this everywhere has to start to go, we are the revolution. We have to be in charge of our own healthcare team. We have to be the leader of that team. We have to assemble the best doctors we can get. It may take some doing it, may be more complicated than just walking over to Kaiser and take whoever they give you for 7 minutes. You might have to do some research. You might have to even spend a little of your hard-earned and very difficult to spend money, especially when you think everything's supposed to be covered by insurance, but it isn't.
Mhm.
It isn't. You're just paying the bill at a later time, and the bill's going to have accumulated interest.
And so are your
And
health
I've,
issues as well.
yeah, I mean, if what do you want to look like and feel like at 80? Most people listening to that, it's 30 years away
Yeah.
or more.
And
And they're
time
like,
flies,
ah,
as we
I'll
know.
worry about that then. But I'm telling you, as someone who is in that demographic, putting time into this stuff now while you're 40, 50, 30, 40, 50 pays off major dividends.
Yeah.
I feel like those investment guys that go to talk to teenagers and they say, look, if you just put $1 a week away, with compounding interest, do you know how much money you'd have? You'd have a million. And they go, oh, come on, it's ridiculous. And they can't see there.
Yeah.
I feel like my message to people is like that guy saying, I am the living proof of what 80, I'm not 80 yet, but I'm very close, can look like and feel like. And that is available. And that doesn't mean I've gone without illnesses, without heart attacks, without arthritis, but you can live an extremely healthy and fulfilling and wide awake life in your eighth and ninth and more decades if you do this stuff now. And yeah, it may not be covered by insurance. It may not be comfortable. It may not be easy to find, but there's more and more ways to get the tests you need and to get the medical and the health coaching advice that you also need.
I think what you said about the teenagers and investments, and I recently said it to my teenager, and not just teenagers, but people overall, I think our perception of time is very discombobulated. We don't realize how fast time flies, very, very fast. And because of that, and because I suppose how we live nowadays with the clickbaits and the social media, and we live very fast lives, people don't have patience either to think I'm investing now for 30 years down the line for 40. It's the best word I can come up with is our perception is just discombobulated. We're
Completely,
not giving it proper thought whatsoever.
completely, completely. We're
And what
just
you said,
why is that? Our brains have been rewired.
mhm,
They've been rewired by, a constant influx of stimuli and things engineered by PhDs to grab our attention and grab our attention and clickbait this and take us there. And our attention span is like between 4 and 11 seconds. And nobody is looking long range. Nobody's composing symphonies anymore or operas anymore. No, we're in the age of the digital. They don't even make albums anymore. Everything is digitalized and in small, very tiny little increments, all meant competing for your dopamine and your likes and your hearts and your attention. That is the currency. And in that kind of an environment where that's all that's valued, is can you get more likes? Can you get more excitement? Can you get more attention? There really isn't a lot of support or encouragement or opportunity to read a novel. Might be 400 pages in which you have to imagine characters and actually think of what they sound like talking and actually bring something to the experience rather than just passively watching a TikTok video. So
mhm,
there's not a lot. I mean, I don't see a lot of young people forming opera society. Not that I love opera or anything. I'm just talking about the difference between the attention span required for a TikTok video and the attention span required to read a book
mhm,
or to even watch a 6-part miniseries or anything like that. And that is why it's so difficult to do things that are rewarded, but in the long term, because we have literally been rewired to expect the reward to come 1 second after the action that we take.
mhm. And it's horrific. I believe it's horrific. And I've noticed as a practitioner myself, I have to catch myself and be conscious of squirrel, squirrel, squirrel.
Oh
But I
yeah. Um,
do, Johnny, I absolutely love reading books. I have a million books, but more so at night. It's part of my wind down, and I'll always read some sort of like all of my followers know I'm a huge Alice in Wonderland fan. So anything that's fantasy or fairy tale, because of what you said, I need to imagine a land that's better than what we're living in right now. And
Yeah,
to
you should
get
go
my
visit France.
I encourage my clients as part of their evening routine to read instead of doing anything to do with electronics. But I describe it, and this seems to be quite encouraging for people. I'll describe it as reading in this way is like a mini vacation for my brain. Every evening I look forward to reading another chapter, but when you're reading, when you're really deep into a really, really good book and story that you really enjoy, you can't wait to get back to that. And when
Oh, yeah.
you're in that, you can't think of anything else because you are focused on those words and what is happening in that story. And all your worries and stresses and fears, everything is gone. But you have to find a really, really good book.
Yes, they're not hard to find.
They're not actually. So
Yeah.
back to what you were saying about the licenses, Johnny. I've heard it several times here that doctors are threatened with their licenses, even if they try to test a broader range hormone panel or
Oh,
full
ab-
thyroid panel. They're restrict. You know, in Alberta, we can't even test vitamin D. It's
what?
not permitted. You can't
You're
test
not allowed to test
yeah,
that.
you can't test vitamin D. So then when you do get a blood panel here, back to the lipids, kind of the generic test is going to be total cholesterol, HDL, LDL, triglycerides. That's
Yeah,
what we're
that's
getting.
that's the Walmart, 99-cent test.
Yeah. I've
And
seen a
and
few people pay out of pocket for lipoprotein A or ApoB, but that's it. That's as far as
well,
it.
ApoB is the next best thing to the test I'm talking about. And you may have more luck getting a doctor to prescribe that because it's in the cardiology book of best practices. They know what that test is, and it is covered in cardiology. So it's less of a heavy lift for a physician who's not familiar with the advanced lipid profile and stuff like that. And the reason that ApoB is a good surrogate for that um, is ApoB is a protein that wraps around every form of cholesterol that could be problematic, all the LDLs, and not that they are all, but they get oxidized, they get inflamed, they get stuck in the. So ApoB is kind of because it wraps around every LDL type molecule. It's kind of a good surrogate for how many LDLs do you actually have. Well, if you count the ApoB, you're going to get pretty close because there's one for each one. So although it's not quite as thorough as the particle test, it says number of lipoproteins, size of the lipoproteins. That's a really good one also. It doesn't do all of that, but it does give you it correlates perfectly with the number of particles. And if your ApoB is very elevated, your risk, that's a real risk factor
Mhm.
that you should take serious.
Yeah. But again, like I said, I've only seen that a couple of times in my practice, and people have paid out of pocket for it. You're
It's not
generally
that
looking.
expensive. And I don't know if you have this in Canada, but we have it in the United States, and I hope that this type of thing will spread. We have a great doctor here in America named Mark Hyman, Dr.
Mhm.
Mark Hyman.
I've seen a few of his panels.
Yeah, I mean, he's very, very good. So he has started something called Function Health, and I believe I don't know for sure, but I think it's $500 a year for a membership. And you get all these tests. Now, you don't get a doctor visit, but you get like the clinical readout and the recommendation. Of course, it's AI generated, but I've read some of them. They're not bad.
Mhm.
But the point is, you get all these tests. You don't have to argue with your Kaiser doctor about why that's the test to get. It's given there. And then you can I mean, I get a lot of people coming to me for one-time private strategy and coaching sessions, and half of them have their function health test, and they say, I just don't know what it means. I know it's the right information, but tell me what it means. And we just spend the time doing that. So you can go around the system.
Yeah. Yeah, I should check into if we can actually access that in
Function
Canada.
health.
The ones I've seen, these people have second addresses in the States, and that's how they were doing it. But I should check. I'm sh I would hope they would expand in the near future at
Or
least.
there, or some other company will will be there that's Canadian.
Hopefully. So then, a common occurrence that I will get with clients, especially husbands who will get their blood results back, is, oh my God, my cholesterol is high. My doctor told me to reduce my eggs and cholesterol consumption, but do you have any other tips to lower cholesterol? And I'll
Mhm.
usually tell them, look, I wouldn't panic too much about the cholesterol. I'd be more looking at your metabolic health and your inflammatory markers. So, what do you have to say to someone, Jonny, who is panicking over high cholesterol?
First of all, let's first of all make a distinction between dietary cholesterol, such as the cholesterol in eggs, and the cholesterol that we're measuring in your blood. So if a doctor were to tell me or someone I knew that you should cut out eggs and shellfish because your cholesterol is high, I would have one piece of advice for that person, and that is to change doctors. So we have known ever since cholesterol became a thing, ever since the National Committee, Consensus Committee in 1986 in the Americas that came out with the policy and recommending, that we cut back on that. We've known ever since Ansel Keys, who put this whole theory on the map, that dietary cholesterol, meaning the cholesterol you consume from foods, has zero correlation with the cholesterol in your blood. Zero. Most of the cholesterol in your blood, 80%, is made by the liver. It's made in the body. You eat 20 eggs, it's going to make less. You eat no eggs, it's going to make more. It's like an import export monitor going, well, if we're importing a lot of coffee, we don't need to grow too much. But wait a minute, we're not importing any, then we better grow a lot more because that's the amount you need.
Mhm.
So the reason that we have all been taught this bullshit is because the American government didn't think we were smart enough to know the difference. And they literally said, well, we know cholesterol that you eat it doesn't make a bit of difference, but we're telling them the cholesterol in the blood is bad. And it's just going to be too complicated for them. Cholesterol is bad. And the doctors who are still believing that BS really should be out of practice. They're ready to retire. If they don't know by now that there's no difference between eating cholesterol and cholesterol in your blood, they're just really. Now, I want to put an asterisk there so that I am being accurate.
Yeah.
There is a condition. It's genetic. It's called familial hypercholesterolemia. It basically means I can look at this water bottle and my cholesterol will go up. It's a genetic condition. We see outrageously high levels of all, whatever, however you're measuring cholesterol, it's off the charts. And usually that's diagnosed, and there are genetic component to that, and it needs to be treated differently. And I'm not an expert on that. And I'm expert enough to know that I've heard 3-hour lectures from genius doctors in Europe that like specialize in it to know it is a separate condition. For the other 99.99% of us, eating cholesterol doesn't matter. If like in the days when they discovered ulcers were not necessarily caused by whatever they thought it was, and this guy did a demonstration. He drank the liquid in front of a symposium of the thing that was supposed to cause the ulcers, and nothing happened. And he was trying to demonstrate that, we were wrongly afraid of whatever this was that they thought caused ulcers. If I had a thing of cholesterol like that, I'd drink it in front of you. It just doesn't matter. So that's number one. What was the rest of the question? I got off on that dietary one because it's just so preposterous that
Well, I
people.
know, wasn't it in 2000 or 2002 that the FDA, I think, or the American Food Guidelines released a statement confirming, and then they re-released it, I think, in 2020, confirming dietary cholesterol has no impact on blood
Oh
cholesterol.
yes, you're right. You're absolutely right. That came out. That statement did come out. I remember quoting it in a million articles. Apparently, the doctor that told you to stop eating eggs didn't read it. But yes, that's absolutely right. They did. They said it is a nutrient of no concern, or it is not a nutrient of concern. In other words, we were wrong. Just ignored the damn thing.
Yeah, you can
Doesn't mean
understand.
you ignore your blood readings. Just understand they're not the same thing.
We can understand why myself and yourself and people that run in our circles know this because we're kind of on top of the research. It's unfortunate doctors are not. And then considering the lay person, you can understand why they never heard this because nobody ever told them. And that's why podcasts like these are so valuable now. So even though we're telling information that's outdated by 20 or more years, really only getting to people's ears now.
That's not unusual in history, by the way. You may remember the story of how vitamins, I don't know if you do, if anyone remembers the story of how vitamin C was discovered. They had, and why we call English people limeys.
I know the story.
They are, you know, can I tell it for so
Yeah.
these ships used to travel and, you know, these long distances, transatlantic, and the sailors would die at an astonishing rate. And somebody discovered maybe by accident that on the ships where there was a lot of lemons and limes, they lived. They didn't have the death rate. And which where limeys came from. And uh many years later, they looked at these things, lemons and limes, of what is in them that could possibly be protecting these sailors against dying. And it led to the discovery of vitamin C, and the disease they were dying from was scurvy. And scurvy is prevented by about 60 milligrams of vitamin C a day, hence the limes and the lemons. Would you like that happened around 1737? Do you want to know when the medical establishment accepted vitamin C? 50 years later,
It's crazy, isn't it?
1787 or thereabouts. 50. So, you know, it's not unusual for this. Upton Sinclair, who's a great American writer, died, of course, a long time ago, but he had a very interesting saying, which was, it is very difficult to get a man to change his position when his salary depends on keeping that position.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
So you just don't have too many people who are making the, what is it, 31 billion a year on statin drugs saying, you know what? Not sure that's the best solution to every problem. They're not going to happen. It's very rare. It has happened. There was a great doctor in South Africa, it is a great doctor in South Africa named Timothy Noakes.
And
He was, oh, okay, great. So for those who don't know, this is a man of enormous influence who has been cited and whose, you know, academic credentials are impeccable, and he's won awards and he's published and everything. And he was a runner, and he was kind of a guru of running, and he was a big believer in low-fat diets. And he had a mea culpa in which he said it took a while where he said I was completely wrong, and he turned into one of the biggest advocates for low carb diets and high fat diets. Cut to the chase, several years later, he's giving advice on Twitter. This distinguished professor of metabolics and everything else, nutritional biochemistry, and he's giving advice to a pregnant mother who asked him, and he said, you know, if you wean yourself off, once he's weaned off breast milk, get him on a high-fat diet as fast as you can, because a baby's brain is 60% DHA and it's made of fat. So their version of the American Dietetic Association took him to court to try to take his license away for giving unscientific information. Here's what happened. If you Google this, folks, put in the nutrition trial of the century, it'll come right up. 4-year trial. There were, I don't know how many hundreds of witnesses, how many thousands of pages of research articles on ketogenic diets and all of this stuff. They flew in two international experts from America, Gary Taubes and Nina Teicholz, to testify at this trial. 4 years later, dismissed everything. He has his license. Nothing was done. And they said he's completely vindicated. He's giving advice that is 1000% supported by science. But that's what we're up against when you try to change any of this stuff.
such a waste of time and taxpayers' money. It's just ridiculous.
So anyway,
So then, I suppose what we're saying to people who are concerned about high cholesterol on their panel, let's not worry about that so much because we should be looking at a lot more. But in the context of a generic blood panel, where The majority of people, that's all they're getting here at least. Then are we telling them, okay, let's not concern ourselves too much about high cholesterol. It's not the be all and end all, but let's look at your triglycerides, your insulin, your inflammatory markers.
But the doctors aren't testing for insulin. It
Most
would that
no.
they
Yeah.
did, would that they would do a fasting insulin test, one of the most valuable tests you could possibly get. And you could probably get that. I have no idea. And by the way, I don't sell function medicine subscriptions or anything, but I know that that is one of the tests that everybody who practices the way I do, or anybody who practices what we call medicine 3.0 or functional medicine, any one of them is going to, fasting insulin tells you a lot because insulin resistance is a predictor of just about every chronic disease we know, including heart disease.
Mhm.
And in our book, The Great Cholesterol Myth, the revised and updated edition, which I urge people please read because it really explains this. It's the metabolic plague of the 21st century, insulin resistance. It's also known as pre-diabetes. 93% of us have some marker for it. It is a creeping epidemic that it's so important that they're now calling Alzheimer's disease type 3 diabetes because they both have insulin resistance as the core. So you have to understand how important your insulin response, and this is why you see biohackers and high performance athletes and people who are really into health all wearing continuous glucose monitors. It's not because they're diabetic, it's because blood sugar gives you great information about your metabolic health. What's it doing in response to food? You can really forget the diet books. You can figure out your diet like that by just looking at what your response is to foods. If you're constantly got high blood sugar, that's a good sign that you're moving towards insulin resistance. You got to look at your fasting insulin. It should be very, very low. If it's high, why is it high? It doesn't need to be high if there's no food in your system. So if you're fasting, it should be sleeping. It should be like under two. And you get somebody who comes in with a fasting insulin of 12, that's overactive. That's because it's too used to jumping up. And you won't burn fat if insulin is high. By the way, that gets everybody's attention.
Yeah.
So insulin basically turns off the fat burning mechanism. So you really, should be looking. And that's why fasting insulin is such an important marker. And
Yeah.
and that's not on any of the tests either. You asked what you could do with that standard old-fashioned test. There's one thing you could do that would at least give you another piece of important data. You take your triglyceride number and you divide by your HDL. That gives you what is called the triglyceride to HDL ratio. So let's use the very simple numbers. If triglycerides are 100 and HDL is 50, 50 into 100 goes 2, so 2.0 is the ratio. If triglycerides were 150 and HDL was 50, the ratio would be 50 into 150, 3.0. So this is a very predictive number for bad outcomes with heart disease. Ideally, that ratio should be 1.5, 2 at the highest.
Mhm.
When it starts ranging into 5, like 200 triglycerides and 40 HDL, which is not an unusual thing, and you know, that's a ratio of 5, very predictive of heart attacks or of heart disease. So, and the good news about that is, although it's, as many people may know already, it's very hard to change your HDL levels. They always tell you exercise does it, but I've been exercising 30. There's not, I haven't moved my HDL number by more than 1 or 2 points in 30, 40 years of exercising. So it's just very difficult to move, but triglycerides are easy.
Mhm.
So if you have 200 to 40 ratio, right? And the 40 is the HDL and the 200 is triglycerides, and that's a ratio of 5, which is really bad. You can't move the HDL, but if you drop your triglycerides to 80, guess what happens to your ratio? It's now 40 into 80, not 40 into 200. Now your ratio is 2, you're good.
Mhm.
So, and how do you drop triglycerides, you might ask? They drop
Nutrition.
like a, huh?
Nutrition.
Well, they do drop like a rock on low carb diets. The liver basically makes triglycerides out of carbs and and fat, glycin, three fatty acid molecules and one glycerol backbone, and it just churns this stuff out, making it out of carbohydrates. So high triglycerides are a very good surrogate for knowing if you're eating too many carbs in your diet.
Are we talking about carbs now in regards to fruit and vegetables, potatoes, carrots? And fat being like our butter, our avocados, and so on? Or are we talking about carbs and fat in the context of the Western style diet, the what majority of people eat, the frappuccinos,
Great
the
question.
pizzas, the
Great question.
cupcakes?
So carbs are the biggest tent of all the three macronutrients, the food macronutrients that provide calories, carbs, protein, and fat. Carbs are kind of the biggest tent. Fat, everybody knows what fat is, whether it's butter or lard or tallow or that it's, fat is fat. And, some are much better than others. Some are damaged, some are not good. But, we all know what fat is. And we all know pretty much what protein is.
Mhm.
Carbs range from the crappiest Dorito and potato chip to sushi to you mentioned carrots and peas and legumes and Brussels sprouts and also potato chips and sodas and cakes and crackers and cookies. And so it's a very wide, big, fat range. And obviously, there's a very big difference metabolically and nutritionally between fruits, vegetables, legumes, and so forth, and highly processed cereal grains and cakes and all that other stuff. Very big difference. Um, from the blood sugar point of view, we can talk from now to doomsday about glycemic index and predicting blood sugar response to foods, and we always predict it to be higher on the high processed grains and the predicted to be lower with the high fibrous vegetables like Brussels sprouts and stuff like that. But there's the best way in the world to know is to buy one of those stupid monitors, stick it on, and stop guessing. And you will find your individual response to these foods, and it will give you more information on how your body's processing energy, how it's doing, how you're feeling, the correlations between blood sugar and how you feel. You might notice that you eat something and then it crashes there, and then, oh, that's why I'm tired. You actually see the numbers. So knowing your blood sugar is a really, really, I recommend that very highly.
Do you think the majority of people who have metabolic dysfunction and genuine issues with all their metabolic markers, are they more likely to be people who just eat crap? Or are they more likely to be people who generally eat, regardless what you call whole foods, but just fruit and vegetables and meat? Like, which one is going to be more dominant in the metabolic issues?
Well, it's a great question. And I'll give you the short answer is the person who's doing as much prevention of user errors as possible. So they're getting enough sleep. They're eating whole foods. Let's just say whole foods, unprocessed foods, whatever the macronutrient distribution is. They're not eating a lot of processed stuff. They're getting enough sleep. Their relationships are good. They're not smoking. They're doing all the right things. They're reducing risk from all of these user errors. But they don't reduce it to nothing. If I get in a car and I keep my hands at 10 and 2, and I'm not distracted, and my texting is off, and I'm certainly not drinking, I've reduced a lot of risks, but I haven't reduced the risk of the drunken teenager who's texting on the next thing and jumps the thing and crashes into it. So we're just talking about risk prevention. There are clearly exceptions to this.
Mhm.
We have a US president who eats every meal at McDonald's and is by visual inspection visibly obese, and he just doesn't break down. And yet we have other people, like my first nutrition professor, who did everything by the book and ate the healthiest, Paleolithic diet you can imagine and was outdoors and died of colon cancer in his early 50s. So you can't get rid of all the risks. But if I'm going to make a bet statistically on who's going to do better, a group who's eating the processed American SAD diet, standard American diet, SAD diet, or a person who's living in Ecuador and eating what they grow and what they can catch and hunt, fish, gather, or pluck, I'm going to bet statistically on the guy in Ecuador.
Mhm. Plus the sun, plus the
That's
lifestyle,
all. That's all of
community, the whole stress is a
it.
huge factor. So, well, then, if we shouldn't be too concerned about cholesterol, and we didn't mention yet, Johnny, if you want to just for a minute, why is cholesterol so important? Like, we've been told that cholesterol is something to be demonized when it comes over a certain number or range, but there are pros to cholesterol.
Tremendous pros, and it's very simple. If I could magically push a button and extract all the cholesterol from your body, you'd be dead in like 2 seconds. So it's a necessary sterol for lots of different cellular operations. It's involved in memory and thinking in the brain. It just it's an important sterol, and it's demonized because it is at the site at the scene of the crime, and when it is carried in lipoproteins that are too numerous, too inflamed, too oxidized, too it is at it very much is a visible sign of something going wrong. My emphasis has only been let's study the lipoproteins because that's where the damage starts. It doesn't start in the cholesterol. It starts in the container. If we got those containers so that they weren't inflamed and they weren't oxidized and there weren't so damn many of them, hey, then my cholesterol would just travel through the little arteries like a passenger on a ship and you'd never hear from it again. So I just would like I'm not saying cholesterol doesn't matter. I'm saying let's look at the underlying thing, which is the containers, which really will give us more information and more actionable plans to make some changes for the better,
So
to reduce inflammation and oxidation and stuff like that.
that was going to be my next question is you've already mentioned oxidation, which for people don't know, I generally reference oxidation to like an old gate. Over years and years, it's
Yeah,
become
that's a very
rusty.
good one. Yeah, rust is oxidation.
Yeah, so your body
And
becomes rusty internally over years of wear and tear and maybe not being taken care of so much. Well, where does inflammation come into the conversation?
well, inflammation is another one of those two-edged swords. So let's start with the part of inflammation that's good. Um, you get a fever, or you pick up a bug and your body creates a fever. That's inflammation. It's part of the healing process. It raises the temperature, hoping to kill a microbe. Um, you get a splinter or you get a flesh wound and it swells up. That's inflammation. That's the white blood cells going to the site of the injury, trying to surround the puncture wound and prevent any invaders from getting in. So in many cases, some inflammation is a very important part of the immune system and the healing process. Let's just get that out of the way. Now, inflammation comes in two flavors. One of them is called acute inflammation, and that's the kind that we all know because we get it when we stub our toe, we drop a rock on our foot, we bump into something, or we slam our shin against the bedpost, or any that, or we get an abscess, or we get a big skin eruption. That's acute. Means, right here, right now, and it's usually painful and harmless.
Or
Harmless
if
in the
we
sense
have the good workout, am I correct? When
the what?
if we have a good workout,
Oh
we're going
yeah.
to experience
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like stress. There are healthy therapeutic doses of inflammation that can be very useful. You're absolutely right. There's inflammation when you do your bicep curls. And of course, okay. So that's acute inflammation. That hurts, but the kind that kills is called chronic inflammation. And that's the kind that flies beneath the radar. You have no symptoms, just like high blood sugar and diabetes, no symptoms. You don't feel different, you know. Your organs are just slowly but surely getting damaged. The cells are getting damaged. Things are dying. Eh, eh, the- there's no way to correct the amount of inflammatory damage. It's an overwhelm from the inflammation. It's like trying, if you have a forest fire or a flood or something like that, it's just the force of nature is so greater than our ability to throw water on it. That's why it's so important that on a basic level, every day we're doing an anti-inflammatory diet. We're doing anti-inflammatory practices. Stress is very inflammatory. Meditation is very anti-inflammatory. And so what you think about and what you put psychic energy on has a lot to do with this as well. But here are all the things that can cause inflammation. Bad food, sugar, vegetable oil, sprays on crops, fungicides, fungicides, pesticides, the 80,000 chemicals that are known to be in the air. stuff that's in the water, the stuff we breathe, all of these produce inflammation. They're all inflammatory substances. The medications we take can be inflammatory. So we need an anti-inflammatory factory in our army in our body that's up to the task. Nobody's going to be without inflammation. Athletes have a lot of it. I mean, there's good things like you mentioned before. If you're running a marathon, man, you are going to be inflamed like you can't believe.
Mm.
So there's a lot of inflammation in athletics and things like that, and oxidation. But that's exactly why you can't. Diet is a big part of building that anti-inflammatory factory. That's why we like omega-3 so much. They're anti-inflammatory. That's why we're not so fans of vegetable oil, which is omega-6, which is pro-inflammatory. We don't need any more pro-inflammatories in
Mhm.
our diet.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of molecular hydrogen, which is a powerful anti-inflammatory, but it's also selective. It's a
Mhm.
selective free radical scavenger. So
Mm.
something I've found to be very effective in keeping my inflammation in check. So last question, Johnny, because I know we're coming up on time and I feel like my followers would kill me if I didn't ask this.
Yes, go ahead.
It's the big S word. You've already mentioned it.
Yes.
Statins.
Oh, statins. Yeah, so here's my position on statins. They're not. I like to put it this way. I am not against statins. I'm against propaganda. So there is a place for statins. And by the way, statins aren't the only drugs that lower cholesterol. There are better ones. Repatha does a better job. So I mean, we're not just talking about one category of drugs. Statins are not the devil. They're not the worst drug that was ever invented. There's not something that people should fear and stay away from no matter what. They are highly overprescribed. They are prescribed based on inadequate information. They have a lot of potential side effects. They don't affect everybody, but they affect a large number of patients. And if in fact they don't present a clear benefit to a patient, why would you take on the side effect risk? So I have never been, Steve Sinatra and I, when we wrote our book, The Great Cholesterol Myth, we were never anti-statin. We were anti this moronic and myopic idea that they should be in the water supply. They're the best drug that ever, we should give them to 13-year-olds and we should, that is pure marketing and publicity. And that I'm terribly offended by and do not like. But we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. There are times and places when statins can be part of a program but not just one where you go to your Kaiser doctor and they say your total cholesterol is 206. We got to put you on a statin. No, run the other way.
Mhm.
But that's because it's just an inadequate diagnosis and an inadequate response to it because you don't really know what's going on.
One of
But
the more, I'm sorry, Johnny. One of the more prominent side effects of a statin is it increases insulin resistance and can push someone into pre-diabetic
you
state.
are correct.
And that's what we spoke about being something we should already look at. So
Absolutely.
if you're in a situation where your doctor thinks you need a statin, we should already be looking at the insulin resistance, but now there's a chance that this statin could make
This
things
might increase
worse.
it. That's right. And it's a good example in the high end, health world is hormone replacement therapy. At one point, growth hormone, human growth hormone was a very big thing. It was like $1,500 a month, and everybody's getting injected with. Guess what? It works really badly if you're on a high carb diet.
Hmm.
It actually will make you diabetic and will make you fatter if you're on it. It just needs that kind of dietary support. And the same thing kind of is what you're saying with this.
Yeah, people need to be aware. Well, Johnny, we covered quite a lot here. Is there anything else you think we missed?
No, people can reach me on Instagram at Jonny Bowden. There's no H in Johnny, Jonny, and my website, johnnybowden.com. And if you like what you hear and you want to do a one-time session with me, I'm available for booking. It's all on the website and Instagram, and just watch my stuff.
And your book is on Amazon for sure here
Of
in Canada.
course.
I got the revised one, so that
Yeah,
one
the
is
revised
definitely
and an
there.
updated version of the Great Cholesterol Myth. Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you, Johnny. I hope this kind of gave people some relief around their concern about their cholesterol. So thank you for helping me bust that cholesterol myth.
Take care. Thank you so much for having me. Bye bye.
Thank you, Johnny. Bye.